Hello, and welcome. Welcome to this special Easter presentation of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and I wish all of you and all of yours a very happy Easter and a glorious spring and summer await us all, I hope. And I pray that new beginnings and the warmth and light and love and growth and all the good stuff that the promise of spring and the promise of Easter delivers for you and your family and your endeavors. Kundalini King is with us, and he shares his sentiments as well for Happy Easter. Thank you, Kundalini King. Nice to have you here. And of course, today, fittingly, as I promised 2 weeks ago, we would be following up on the series of The Way. 3 weeks ago, we talked about the way of iron, and 2 weeks ago, we talked about the way of water in reference to the age of Aquarius. And today, being Easter, we're going to be talking about the way of light. And last week, which would have been a surprise to all, I introduced the Human Upgrade Challenge. And Kundalini King says that his challenge video is uploading as we speak. So you will have to share the link with me, Kundalini King, when it's finished, and then we can potentially take a look at that. Normally, I would hope that I receive those ahead of time, but anyway, it's this week has been crazy for me as well, because as I mentioned last week, I had to cancel the live stream because we have guests from Hungary, family visiting from Hungary, and I had various duties to perform, not just last weekend, but throughout the week, which is why I had hoped to have my solution video for the challenge completed by today and by the live stream, but that's not the case. It's not finished. It's mostly finished in terms of a PowerPoint presentation, so we'll be going through that, but some of the animations are probably going to be a little bit wonky or a little bit off, because I really did not have a chance to do that, because on top of the fact that we have family from Hungary visiting, we also have family from the United States. My brother and his family were coming up for Easter from Connecticut, and they brought the dog. And suffice it to say, I end up doing dog sitting duties on top of everything else. So between playing tour guide for the guests from Hungary this past week, and then playing babysitter to the dog, or rather, dog sitter, but no, she's a big baby. So it really ate into my time and ability to work on the Human Upgrade Challenge. So although I have an answer for you and a challenge for next week, the video presenting it with the same clarity as last week's video, that won't materialize before tomorrow. So we'll just have to deal with it. That's just the way it is. I don't think there's going to be much in the way of tears being shed because of that. In fact, I'm not even sure how many people are tuning in today, because it is Easter Sunday after all. So I think everybody is doing busy with family and so on. So we may just have a very short session today as we go through the the answer to the challenge. And Kundalini says, "Don't say hungry. I'm on my 3rd day in my fast." Not hungry, my friend. Hungary. Hungary, Magyar Ország in Hungarian. All right. So maybe the best thing to do here is to we'll give a few minutes to see if anybody else shows up. But Kundalini King, I don't want to get into the solution until we have an opportunity to look at your challenge video, your response video. So again, you'll have to let me know when that's uploaded. So in the meantime, before we get into the solution to the challenge this week, which was to know God's thoughts on 11:11. Today being Easter, this is really the way of light. Easter is all about celebration of the way of light, and specifically the capacity of light to triumph over darkness. That's what is being reflected in the background behind me. And of course, we're referring to the resurrection of Christ. And the resurrection represents the light conquering death. And the way of light, that is the path to conquering death, the path of light, the way of light, has another name. And that name is the path of the Bodhisattva. The path of suffering and sacrifice for humanity. It is the highest path there is. There is no endeavor that is greater. There's no endeavor that is more difficult, more challenging. It is the highest calling that any monad can be called to. The path of death and resurrection, the path of crucifixion, the way to become one and truly one with the light of Christ. And Jesus of Nazareth, also known as Master Abramento, gave us the greatest example of someone who walked that path and showed us the way. And it is why, speaking as the Christ speaking through his mortal vessel, said, "I am the way, the truth, and the light." The way and the light and the truth, they are synonymous. They are one. The way of light is thus the way of truth. And it is the way. It is the one path, the one way to oneness with the Christ. People like to talk about Christ consciousness and acquiring Christ consciousness and being one with Christ consciousness and all manner of fantasies and illusions and delusions of the mind. But there is only one path to being one with Christ, and that is the path of crucifixion. Some would argue that there is a second path, known as the spiral path. But that path does not afford a monad entrance into the absolute. Not to my knowledge. And it would require so many thousands upon thousands of reincarnations on that slow upward journey. And this is the path of the so-called Pratyeka Buddhas or Nirvanis. But that path, the spiral path, does not afford someone the rank of master. And without the rank of master, one cannot undertake the challenge of the remaining two mountains. There are three mountains: the mountain of initiation, the mountain of resurrection, and the mountain of ascension. And the remaining two mountains, resurrection and ascension, are reserved for those who have already traversed the first mountain of mastery. The Pratyeka Buddhas or the Nirvanis, who complete the minor mysteries but never enter into the major mysteries, they choose the spiral path, the path of, let's call it, comfort, the path of countless reincarnations. They, because they never achieve mastery of the first mountain, they do not earn the right to come and walk the path of the Bodhisattva unless they choose to upgrade and leave the spiral path behind and come and assume the straight path, the direct path, the way of light, the path of suffering and sacrifice for humanity. Because in truth, the Nirvanis, the Pratyeka Buddhas, the ones walking the spiral path, they work for humanity, they work on themselves, they work to eliminate some ego, but they don't walk a path of suffering and sacrifice for humanity. They don't seek to eliminate all of the remaining karma in one lifetime. But that is the path of the Bodhisattva. That is the way of light. The way of light is to rid yourself, cleanse yourself of all your remaining darkness, to be free well and truly of your so-called shadow self, and integrate all that remains bottled up inside of that shadow, and learn all that that shadow is there to teach. That's what's known as the integration of the shadow. It's the integration of that which the shadow obscures. It is the release of the light that is in the shadow. And that is the path that the great suffering and sacrifice allows for, that sublimation, that transmutation, that alchemical process of sublimating what remains of the flesh and the mechanical self and the animal ego, into the gold of the human soul, the solar bodies. Kundalini says, thank you. He says, hopefully in the next 5 minutes. He says, nope, the upload is too slow. I will link it in the comments at some point. No worries, Kundalini, no worries. There's no real rush. It'll take its time, and we will get to it. You will let us know when it's available for everyone to collectively take a look at here. So the way of light, then, as you know from your own experience, your own direct experience, even a single candle flame can create a space of light when you find yourself in complete darkness. A single lit flame, It illuminates a sphere. Light has tremendous power over darkness, but it is not an overwhelming or absolute power over darkness. It is tremendously powerful. As I said, one candle flame can illuminate a darkened room or darkened passage, or at least illuminate enough that we can see far enough ahead. We don't trip over anything, that we don't bump into anything. And if you consider the volume of candle flame in comparison to the volume of lit space that single candle flame produces, then you begin to greatly appreciate the power and intensity of the light in comparison to the darkness, because there's a lot more darkness in that scenario of being in complete pitch black at night, walking down a corridor or in a large room. And you can see just how far that lit candle, how far its light will travel and bring some illumination to what was completely pitch black. And that trend happens in the very small, but also the incomprehensibly large. So, for instance, in our solar system, the sun and the sun's light and the sun's heat is predominantly what energizes and illuminates the whole of our solar system. And again, if you compare as a ratio the size of the sun, now the sun is enormous. Don't get me wrong, but in the context of the solar system and how large and how expansive the solar system is, and how far the light from the sun reaches. And then what about beyond our solar system? We look up at the night sky and we see millions of stars. The ones that are closer to us, they shine more brightly, and the ones that are larger, etc. But generally speaking, we can see stars that are hundreds of light years away. And all around, it appears anyway to our eyes that all around is dark space. But the reality is that blackness, that darkness, is full of light. And that the light from all of those stars are actually intersecting one another. And were we able to see fully and completely with all of our consciousness and all of our higher faculties awakened, we would be able to see that space is full of light. It is only that we're trapped within our three-dimensional physical perception that we see only the binary duality of light and dark, even when we look up into space. So we are unable to appreciate in the way that we can perhaps appreciate the candle flame illuminating an entire room. And we can appreciate that just because of the context of that situation and circumstance. But we don't see the light from the sun or from the other stars filling the sky as it does. It's Kundalini King says monad or circle, trinity 3, triangle, quaternity square of 4. Okay, 3 ego, 4 self, ego self axis. 1111 is 4. Oh, you're giving me your explanation for 1111. With the quaternity, we include evil, we have a whole, and on our ascension toward the center to the cosmos, human 3.0 can confront all evil. Well, you're not wrong on 1111's relationship with 4. That's almost self-evident, isn't it? I mean, there's 4 ones in there. So that's on the right track. For sure, that's on the right track. And he also mentions on our ascension towards the center to the cosmos, human 3.0 can confront all evil. Okay, so if that's the gist of it, Kundalini, then we can, we can perhaps move on. Because the pairing of the answer to this week's Human Upgrade Challenge to Easter and the topic of the way of light is not coincidental, and it's not accidental. There's very much method to it. So perhaps we should just go ahead and show you what it is we had been working on that really needs to be in a video form, and hopefully I'll be able to put it into a video form by tomorrow. Kundalini King adds the philosopher's stone, or the philosophical stone. Which is a pyramid on top of a square. It's the 9-sided cubic stone, also known as the obelisk. And Kundalini King says, yes, let's move on. So, okay. So what then is 1111 and God's thoughts on duality in 1111? How does this relate to the way of light or the way of Christ? So why don't we see if we can't get into it? So this is, as you can tell, this is just a disclaimer that would go at the beginning of the video. None of the music or anything is going to work for this presentation. So we have the Human Upgrade Challenge, seek God's thoughts, self-evident experiential knowledge of, okay. And the story so far, according to Albert Einstein's famous quotation, he wanted to know his creator's unconditional thoughts over the conditioned details of creation. Conscious being versus mechanicity of not being establishes the dichotomy of a bipolar universe. And if you recall these slides from the video, human 2.0, trapped in the illusion and mechanicity of binary duality, suffers a busy mind on the downward spiral of hypnosis and ignorance, is saved only by the power of 1111. That's us falling into the downward spiral of mechanicity and being saved by 1111. Humanity needs the critical upgrade to trinary human 3.0 to face the trials as true human beings. The Human Upgrade Challenge calls us to first seek God's thoughts on duality and 1111. And now, let's seek and unearth God's thoughts on duality and 1111. So, as I mentioned in the previous video, 1111 is a universal core numerical expression. It's the minimum required actions needed to create reality. It is, in other words, the very foundations of reality itself. But the question is why and how? And as I mentioned, if you pump it into ChatGPT, you get a whole bunch of gobbledygook, which is just basically parroting what this humanity thinks it knows about 1111. But I also mentioned that if you do a Google image search, if you do a search for 1111 tattoos, you discover that there must be something to this. There must be something to it, because this is like some kind of a almost universal, intuitive knowing that people have that this is of significance. As I mentioned, it's symbolic and mathematical, abstract and geometric, meaningful and logical. It's deeply personal, but also universal, experiential and allegorical, conscious and mechanical. So, the challenge was to unearth God's thoughts. So, why don't we begin as God began, with nothing? Absolute nothing. The law of zero. Zero laws. How else can God begin to create the universe than from zero, from nothing? This is the whole point of God being God, the absolute, abstract nothing, and creating the universe out of nothing. He begins with zero. He begins with nothing. No thing. It cannot be any other way. Because this whole point of creation, you have to create something. And that is the first mystery. What is this something that is created from nothing? And the law of one unfolds from the absolute. One. You have nothing, and then you have something. One something. One thing. In other words, you add one to nothing. And you set up this binary duality of nothing and something. This is duality. This is the first step. This is it. This is self-evident and incontrovertible. This just is. It is this way. The moment you create something, you've created the law of one. The mathematical phenomenon that we know and understand as one comes into existence the moment something is created out of nothing. But at that moment, a duality is created and a separation, because something is not nothing. Something is distinct and unique from nothing, just as one is not zero. It is precisely plus one. if this seems a little, what would you call it? If this seems a little rudimentary or elementary, it's because it is. And it should be self-evident. And on this basis, you can argue, well, you see, well, and of course, this is why we created computers to think in terms of ones and zeros, right? Binary duality. It's literally called binary language. Zeros and ones. But we have to consider that at this point in the act of creation, something is the only thing. Now, if something is the only thing, then by definition, one thing, something, is everything. If something is the only thing, that one something must also be everything. And we visualize that, we represent that in the continuum of a circle, the circumference of a circle. And the distance between nothing and something, that +1, becomes the radius of the circle, because one thing is everything. So what we call one point, that one thing, but that one thing can appear at any point. At any point along this continuum, because this line is always +1 away from zero, from nothing. So the circumference at radius 1, right? That one thing that you created, that something, is also everything. But how can one point be everything at a distance of 1 from its origin? So that's why mathematically we draw the circle. This is the perfect circle. This is the Platonic circle. Plato's concept of perfection was everything was in circles and moved in circles. Now, why are we... Hang on a second while I figure out why is it my slide's not advancing. Let's try the keyboard. There we go. So everything, the circle, radiates out of nothing with a radius of 1. But what that means is that if you have a radius of 1, you have a diameter of 2. And that what radiates in the positive direction also radiates out in a negative direction. It's opposite. So when you create something, you automatically also create its inverse, its opposite. And this is just because if that one thing has to be everything, it can only be everything by virtue of its inverse point. Because when that radius revolves around to encompass at 180 degrees, it is precisely, it's in the inverse direction from where it began. So you have polarity now, and the law of 2, and they are 2 ones. In other words, it's 11, 1, 1. And this now defines everything, because positive and negative. You can't have a positive 1 point without having a negative 1 point, its inverse, about the origin, which is 0. This is it simply must be this way. It can't be any other way. You can't have just a positive universe. It must have its reflection. It must have its complement. And with this, you also create gender, masculine and feminine, positive and negative, masculine and feminine. But the details of that can come later. For right now, let's just stick with what's very basic and obviously here in front of us. So the two things, we get the law of opposites. So a different kind of duality, the duality between 1 and -1. And that the polarized radiation creates the diametric opposition in perfect symmetry. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, which is, by the way, Genesis 1:1. And now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. Genesis 1:2-4. And remember what I said earlier about the space being filled with light. So light and darkness, right? The actual, what we understand as light and dark is often reversed. But that's just because of the background that I'm using and the colors that we're using in this video. I might have to change that on the on the next version of it. But there's a problem with everything in duality. And that problem is separation. The origin or nothing is separate from everything. How can the source of everything be separate from everything? This is a problem. Because that one thing has to be everything. But if it's everything, it has to include the source from whence it came, because that source is also part of that everything. But here we see that there's a disconnect, there's a separation. This can't be this way. So what do? And the answer is, the solution is to involve the origin by unfolding the law of 2 twice more. And the 2 radii that were 1 diameter become 2 diameters, that is 4 radii. And the origin is now united with everything. The matrix is valid, and infinity has been defined. And each circle must obey the law of 2, the law of duality, as the first circle did. So another way to say that is, we twist everything. We put a twist in the universe. But the traveling around the one now, the continuum is 1, 1, 1, 1. The graphic shows +1 and -1, -1 and +1. So the opposites are there, but the distance is still 1. 1, 1, 1, 1. This is the continuum of everything. And why the Holy Eight, or the infinity symbol, represents what it represents. and why it is what it is and has to be shaped that way, and why it's not a simple circle, and why duality, nothing can exist in a simple duality, because everything cannot be separate from its source. The origin of everything, which is nothing, must be at the center and the focal point of a continuum. And that continuum is defined by 4 actions, 4 steps. 1, 1, 1, 1. Each step has a distance of 1. Even if it's going negative, from the point of view of that traveling, it's still the same distance. So you have 4 ones. 1, 1, 1, 1. Now, the source of everything is no longer separate from everything. It's all part of one continuum. Now, the law of 3 unfolds, which is also 1111 or 1111. And the reason why that is because each one of these circles has a maximum and a minimum point, +1 and -1. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 points. But the 2 shared points are coincident. So you have 3 points and 1, 2, 3, 4 movements. So it's like 3 stops and 4 starts. So 1111 equals 3 plus 4, or the law of 7, which is the organizational law of the universe. And remember that we arrived at this by unfolding the law of 2 3 times. Duality is being expressed 3 times. First, in the original circle, and then twice more to produce infinity. And we are also actually unfolding the numbers 5 and 6 as well, but we'll get to that at some point in the future. In the meantime, we can talk about the 7 colors, because we're talking about the law of 7 now. The law of 7, the organizational law of the universe, is baked into 1111, because 1111 is both 3 and it is 4, and 3 plus 4 is 7. And it is also, 1111 also baked into this is the numbers 5 and 6, and 5 plus 6 is 11, which comes back to the 1111. But in terms of 7, we have 7 primary colors, we have 7 notes, 7 octaves, we have the 7 chakras, primary chakras, we have the 7 dimensions in Kabbalah, we have the 7 deadly sins, we have the 7 wonders of the world, and incidentally, we have 7 continents. So the number 7, and we have lucky number 7, and if you add 7 plus 3, you end up with 10, which comes back to the 1 and 0 that we began with. Where's my whiteboard? Here we go, right? So, which is the 1 and the 0 that we began with, the original binary duality. But because that 1111 is also 3 plus 4, 7 plus 4 obviously equals 11. But 3 is the law of three, positive, negative, and union of positive and negative, which is neutral. So we could say masculine, feminine, and union. This is the law of three, which is the creative law of the universe. And we saw that, we walked ourselves through that in the presentation itself. Because everything, the one thing, is broken up into a positive and a negative and their union. And that, of course, is expressed inside of that 1111. So you have the creative law of the universe, the law of three, the organizational law of the universe, the law of seven, and the law of four, which is the law which defines the four cardinal points, the four directions, the four elements, and the four movements, and the four pillars. Well, let's skip through this. So we end up with 1111. And, 1111 at 1111 Constitution Avenue, you have the Internal Revenue Service building. Jennifer says a pyramid has 7 points. Does it? It has 5 by my reckoning, but maybe you're counting them differently. She says, I don't think you believe in twin souls or flames, but this is a perfect description of them. Possibly everyone has one. Yeah, everybody does have a twin flame, a twin soul. Which, again, it's 1111, because each of us have the positive and negative within us. So you bring two people together, and it's 1111. Benjamin says that's cool. Kundalini King earlier, he said he mentioned the Ouroboros, and he also mentioned that he has an 1111 tattoo, that he got it in 2011. And he also mentioned we fell into consciousness. And Kundalini says, good afternoon, Ben. Happy Easter Sunday. Jennifer says, a hexagonal pyramid. Yes, well, certainly a hexagonal pyramid will have 7 points, for sure. But the Great Pyramid of Giza has 5. So at 1111 Constitution Avenue, we have the Internal Revenue Service, or the IRS. But you will find, Kundalini King says, Jennifer's comments aren't appearing for us. Oh, this sometimes happens because Jennifer is watching on Facebook. It sometimes happens that StreamYards gets a little confused, and people making comments on one platform, people who are watching on the other platform can't see them. So I'll do my best to show them and read them out loud. But there's not much I can do about that. It's a StreamYards problem. So sorry about that, Kundalini. When we talk about 4 pillars and how 1111 contains the number 3, it just so happens that when you create an entranceway or an arch with 4 pillars, like what you see before you, yes, you have 4 pillars, 1111, and you have 3 arches, 3 gateways, 3 portals, a main one and 2 on the sides, i.e. you have a masculine, a feminine, and the union of them. And the middle one is usually made bigger. And this is by no means an isolated incident. This is something that you will find again and again. This is the temple of Nike, where you have 4 pillars representing a gate or a portal of some kind. And here again, we have this large gate in the middle and the 2 smaller ones off to the side. This temple is in India. And this one, I believe, is Sri Lanka. And again, 4 pillars guarding the entrance of a gate. Kundalini King says, well, Jennifer, if you want us to see your comments, you're going to have to switch to, or you're going to have to watch on and comment on YouTube. Let's see what else. Has my computer frozen up? Oh, no. Well, can everybody still hear me okay? It seems that my computer is in the process of freezing up, and that I won't be able to show you any more slides or do any more whiteboarding, which is a pain. No, it seems to have snapped out of it again. Let's see if I can get it going again. There we go. Okay, so here's another here's another 1111 and a portal, and here's yet another one where you have these indents representing the 4. And again, you will see this everywhere. So that's basically the end of my, that's as far as I got on the presentation. So, but the question then, and the challenge for next week is, where do we go from here? We have 1111, and we have the laws of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6. But where do we go from here? You saw how this unfolded. Now, can you take this to the next level? And specifically, how do we get from 1111 to the Tao, the yin and yang? And I wish I wish it was the last thing I should have done before, but I just simply ran out of time. It was just too much, to try to do. This week with the guests from Hungary. It was like I just bit off it was just terrible timing, and I bit off bit off much more than I could chew. Let me see if I can just do this really quick. There should be something called symbols. All right. Okay. So how do we get from this to this? That will be your challenge for the upcoming week. You now know what 1111 is, and the power of 1111, and what 1111 actually represents. And Kundalini King was on the right track at the beginning when he was making the connection between the numbers 4 and the number 3, and how, I mean, it's not hard to take the leap, because there's 4 ones in 1111. It's 1111. It's not hard to count those and arrive at 4. How we get to 3 is a little bit, to walk through the steps and see the points and how one point is coincident. So it's the center, it's the 2 ones in the middle that are coincident. But really, when you look at it from the perspective of the when you look at it from the perspective of the gates, right? It's the pillars, it's the space between the pillars that that form the 3. So it's the spaces between the ones that count the number 3, that create the number 3. So with that background and having walked through that, can we now discern the steps, and also understanding that one's positive and one's negative? Can we discern the steps it takes to get from this to this? That's your challenge for next week. How does the Tao emerge out of 1111? And you have a week to do it. The interesting thing about this exercise, this first exercise, was comprehending how duality, we cannot have a universe that exists in duality. So the very fact that this is why in Sanskrit and in Hinduism, they refer to this universe as Maya, illusion, because our universe, the physical universe of binary duality, where everything is material, everything is physical, that universe, so all of materialist science and the assumptions made by materialist science are fundamentally incorrect. This universe cannot exist as they conceive of it. It is impossible. But a universe of both positive and negative, of physical and metaphysical, whereby the universe that we experience is the union between these, or the in-breath and out-breath of the universe, as we undertake the the continuum between positive infinity and negative infinity. Because remember, we're still working on the assumption that one is everything, that one thing, something is everything. Because when something is the only thing, it has to be everything. And then everything pulses into being and not being any number of times in any moment as it goes through the continuum. And this archetype of the in-breath and the out-breath is universal and extends from the micro and the nano all the way to the megalocosmos and the whole of the universe. And the Mahamambantara, or the Great Cosmic Day, and the Mahabharata, which is the Great Cosmic, the Great Cosmic Night. I forgot those terms right. So, how do we get from that to that? All right. I think that more or less covers that for today. And like I say, I have to try to finish that video and get it out as soon as possible. But my guests are going to be here all the way till Thursday, so we'll see how far I get with it. Oh, we can put the whiteboard back up. So coming back to the way of light then. As 1111 describes, there's something else that we can talk about with 1111. And because we're talking about Easter, we're speaking on Easter, and we're talking about the way of light. And I mentioned at the beginning that Easter is perhaps the best time of year to be talking about the way of light. So what if we drew a cross? You know what the Rosicrucians say, right? Jesus is the rose on the cross. Well, if you add motion to this cross, right, you end up with that swastika, which is a very ancient symbol that is describing the movement of the light. But no matter how you slice it here, you have 1, 1, 1, and 1. That's 1111. Sure, you have 1 and 2 crossed. And where they unite, you have 3. Because this is positive and this is negative, and this is union of positive and negative. So without a doubt, you have 3 here. But you also have 4. And 1111 is both 4, and it's with the union of these two in the middle, it's also 3. And the cross is the symbol of Christ, especially at Easter. And as I was describing earlier, the way of Christ, the way of the Bodhisattva, is the way of light. Because the cross represents the cross, and the resurrection represent the light conquering darkness, the light conquering death, and the power of the light to do so. But that light also creates. And that light organizes, which are the laws of 3 and 4, which are both in 1111. I had always, like most people, felt an affinity, some intuitive knowing about 1111, just like everybody. When they keep seeing it show up, or they keep, or they wake up, or they look at their clock, and every time they look at a clock, it's always 1111. And so I experienced that myself. But it wasn't until all of this was revealed to me in meditation that I truly began to grasp and appreciate what 1111 really represents and its significance. And I would be remiss not to mention that when we talk about the 4, we talked about the 4 cardinal points. So north, south, east, and west. And we can talk about the 4 elements. So what are they? They're earth, air, fire, and water. And I know, I can't remember there are symbols for them that use triangles. I can't remember what they are off the top of my head because I have a terrible memory. But there's also the 4 pillars, because we've been talking about pillars. There's also the 4 pillars. And I was showing you the temples with their pillars and their archways and so on. So there's the 4 pillars. Whoops, I don't want to do that. Okay, whatever. The 4 pillars of gnosis, the 4 pillars of knowledge. And they are art. You know what? I'm going to try to do it this way and see how far we get. If I do it. No, it's not going to work like that. Art, religion, science, and philosophy. By the way, if you hear a dog whining in the background, that's the dog that I'm dog sitting, wanting to come in here and sit on my lap. But I can't let that happen because I won't be able to do a single darn thing, including draw on the whiteboard. So these are the 4 pillars of gnosis. Again, we're looking at, there's no avoiding it. It's 1111. And when we talk about religion and science, we're talking about not the degenerated versions of these that we believe are what constitute those pillars. We're talking about genuine, pure metaphysical science and genuine, pure mystical religion, esoteric religion, not the dogmatic belief systems that they had degenerated into, just as science has degenerated into dogmatic materialism and empiricism. In the same way, art has become just pop culture and ego masturbation. We're talking about genuine high art. So that 1111, those 4 pillars, they constitute much more, and you will keep encountering them again and again and again, just as you will encounter the 3 that is the space between the 4, that is the birthing canal. If the 1111 are the pillars that uphold the edifice of the temple, the 3 is the portal that allows us to pass from one world to another and return transformed. It's the portal through which the divine can enter into the world through us, and it is the portal through which the mundane and the carnal can be initiated and transformed and transmuted and sublimated and enter into the mysteries within the temple. All of that and more is in 1111. 1111, in this sense, could be the very number of God. It is certainly the number that embodies and encompasses God's creation for the reasons that I've already outlined and made clear, because you cannot have anything less than 1111. Because duality on its own can't exist that way, can't exist in that form. The reason why I can say that this is a reflection of God's thoughts on duality in 1111 is because we did an exercise of self-evident experiential knowledge, what some people would refer to as a thought experiment, but really it was an exercise of experience, of going step by step and going from 0 to something to everything, and recognizing that the minimum number of actions and the minimum expression reflecting the nature of the minimum actions required to create everything, even if everything is just one thing, is 1111, 1111, 11 above and 11 below. Of course, the universe continues to unfold from there, and that's why the challenge for next week is to describe or show or walk step by step from 1111 to the Tao. And then from there, we will go further, another step. But this way, going step by step, hopefully we can do it in a manageable way. Gonna backtrack here and get a couple of get caught up on some comments. Jennifer says, Earth has a grid system, aka as ley lines, And oftentimes dark or negative buildings are built on intersecting lines. Earth has its own chakra system as we do. I'm going to guess that 1111 Constitution Drive is on one. Could very well be. Could very well be. And she says cathedrals also, which are buildings of light, I presume. Yes. Kundalini King says, yeah, we are all real busy this week. And he says, my beloved canine companion Maggie died Friday night. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Kundalini King. Sorry to hear about the passing of your dog. And Kundalini says, I have 16 dogs now. And he also says, woohoo, I was working on that already. He also mentions Polaris, which is the pole star of the Earth anyway. And he says, wait till you see my tattoo. And he says, numbers I see now are 19 and 42. Well, that's interesting numbers. And he says, water, earth, air, fire, spirit. I was referring to the elements. And he says, I just did a music project on my channel, Atlas of the 5 Elements. You should check it out. After this live stream, I am uploaded the song, Fire. And finally, he says, I did water first 2 weeks ago after your live stream. So it's the art is inspired partly by you, my friend. Well, thank you. That's kind of you to say. Kundalini King just mentioned fire. And when we think about, contemplate the light in the context of Christ, he is called not just the light, he is the light of lights. But he's not just the light, nor is he just the light of lights. He's also known as the fire of fires. So the Christ embodies fire and light. And this is notable to contemplate because certainly in our purview and our point of view, light most often is a byproduct is not the right word, is born of fire. And whether that fire is chemical fire, so that is the combustion of some material or some substance, be it oil or benzene or wood, some combustible material, or even the aforementioned candle wick, and it's lit on fire. The light is what emanates from the fire. And when we look up in the sky, whether it is at our own sun or other stars, we know that what's taking place there is incredible fusion reactions, nuclear reactions that produce incomprehensible amounts of heat and light. So whether we're looking at nuclear reactions, nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, or we're looking at chemical reactions, and flammable chemicals producing fire and light and heat, or we look to electricity, because electricity too is fire. We can experience electricity as fire when we witness lightning, or when we go to some kind of a science display where they have arcing, electricity arcing between electrodes, and that too is fire. And most of our light sources in the modern world run on electricity, is it not so? And fire has the potential to both create and destroy. The best example of that might be looking at the power of a volcano and the energy, the latent energy and the heat of a volcano and its capacity to wreak terrible destruction. But in the process of erupting, it also spews hot lava, what was formerly magma, within the Earth's core and the Earth's mantle. It comes out of the volcano, and we call it lava when it's on the surface, and it cools and it eventually becomes stone, very young stone. Volcanoes are giving birth to new members of the mineral kingdom. That same volcano that can wipe out the countryside and wipe out cities like they did ancient Pompeii and cover everything in ash and just wreak terrible destruction is actually giving birth to new life, to monads in the mineral kingdom. And still in relation to the mineral kingdom, when we apply fire to water, we can bring water to a boil. And in that boiling water, we can dissolve many substances. So many things can be broken down in boiling water. So water that has fire applied to it. But in boiling water, the water that has been united with fire, we can also crystallize. You can create crystals in boiling water. And that's why Master Samael said, in order for that which must be dissolved to dissolve, and that which must be crystallized to crystallize, the water must boil at 100 degrees. Well, the water won't boil at 100 degrees without the application of fire. And what is true for the crystallization, say, of crystals, it's also true for the crystallization of our solar bodies, our metaphysical vehicle of the supernal worlds. That is the union of fire and water, in other words, is what we use to crystallize the vessel of light. And when we talk about the path of the Bodhisattva as a path of suffering and sacrifice for humanity, we can liken it to the tempering of steel and the relentless pounding and of a blacksmith and his hammering of the steel on an anvil and placing the steel back in the fire to do what? To soften it, to make it pliable, malleable. And then he pulls it out of the fire and puts it on the anvil and bangs away. And what is he doing? He's tempering that steel. And then he dunks it in the trough of cold water. And this is a process that he repeats over and over again. And to bring the molecules of that steel more and more into alignment, to the point where you have the Japanese sword makers of the ancient world who created the katana blades that were the metal was folded over 500 times and tempered over and over and over again to create a blade of such precision and such perfection. It was the application of fire and water and the force, the pressure, and the repeated pounding, the repeated strikes of the blacksmith's hammer while the fire was applied to the steel. Temperance is one of the virtues. To be tempered and temperance are related. And it is precisely by walking the path of the Bodhisattva, walking over hot coals, walking through the fires of hell. I mean, we have these expressions for a reason, because we have the expressions like trials by fire and baptism by fire. We have baptism by water. We all know about baptism by water, but then there's baptism by fire, which is a whole different level of initiation. It's a whole different level of purification. Because that's the other thing that fire does. It purifies. And boiling water purifies. If you're out camping and you find a creek and you draw water from a creek and you're worried about what contaminants might be in the water, you're worried about getting some bacterial infection or bacterial illness, you boil the water. So fire has that cleansing potential. And when the fire is applied, whether it be to water or to earth, as in the case of the blacksmith, they're applying fire and water to earth, because steel, metal, I mean, 2 weeks ago, we talked about the way of iron. To sublimate iron, to transmute it, to transform it into something of lightness and precision and perfection in the hands of a skilled blacksmith as he applies fire and water. That a work of steel that is so fine, one can see one's own reflection in it. The earth, the iron, now reflects the light. You see, this is all related. Have we undergone sufficient temperance that we too reflect the light? Has our iron been sufficiently tempered, been sufficiently boiled with the application of fire in the waters, that which must be dissolved within us has been dissolved, and all impurities within us have been pounded out with the application of heat and water and pressure and repeated bouts of temperance, such that we now reflect the light. This is the way of light. This is the path of the Bodhisattva. This is the path of the razor's edge, the direct path. And it's the path that Jesus walked. It's self-evident that this is the path that Jesus of Nazareth walked. Right up Calvary, right up to the foot of the cross, which then he was nailed to and died upon. And began the climb up the second mountain of resurrection, which that mountain is not one that we climb in this world, but that mountain is a mountain that Jesus ascended in hell, because after he died, he descended into hell, where he was tasked with saving souls that were on the edge of the light. As we were walking through the human upgrade challenge, and we were creating out of nothing, and that duality did appear, and we ended up with the heavens above and the substance below, the stance and substance, the heavens and hell, if you will. It becomes clear that light cannot exist without darkness, because that's where we arrived at, that you can't have duality alone. You have to have the union of light and dark. You have to have the law of three, positive, negative, and their union. So the light, the dark, and the union of light and dark. Well, what is the union of light and dark? Any time that the light confronts darkness. Anytime light defeats darkness, darkness defeats light. Anytime the dance of light and dark taking place, or the union of those two phenomena. But light cannot exist without the darkness. Light cannot know itself without the darkness. Light cannot know what it's capable of unless it confronts the darkness. And that is why the path of the Bodhisattva, the way of light, must be one of suffering and sacrifice, and must be one of challenging and overcoming the darkness. First and foremost, the darkness within ourselves. That's why Carl Jung said, one does not achieve enlightenment by envisioning figures of light, but by making the subconscious conscious, by bringing light to unconsciousness and shining the light in the darkness. And he said the integration of the shadow. Well, what is the shadow? Shadow is that which the light casts when it is confronted by the obscurations to the light. So what is hiding in the shadow but the light itself? The path of light, the way of light, is always through darkness. There is no avoiding it. The more we avoid the dark, the more we avoid the suffering and sacrifice, the difficulty, the challenge, the more we avoid descending into hell, the more we will never ascend into heaven, because it's impossible to do so in accordance with the Alm of Life, which I've drawn a million times. But it's worthwhile for the sake of the fact that we're talking about Easter and Jesus descending into the dead. On the Alm of Life, you cannot ascend without first descending. Every new day is a new dawn, but that dawn is born in the darkness. And the light, the sun rises over the horizon, and a new day is born out of the darkness of the previous night. And like I was mentioning earlier about the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath, the cycles, the circles, that's Plato's near obsession with the perfection of circles and cycles, and what we could call at times the perennial rhythm of creation, the great in-breath and out-breath, or the beating of your heart as it pulses, as the two chambers of your heart pulse in order to move blood to the lungs and back from the lungs. And that the pulsation of the heart mirrors and reflects the breathing of the lungs, the in and the in and out, expansion and contraction, what Walter Russell referred to as radiation and gravitation, or positive and negative, in and out, up and down. Right? When you look at the frequency and vibration, you have the waveform. And I've shown in the past how you have two waves in two different dimensions. In the third dimension, linking to the zero dimension, those two waves create the spiral. It's not possible to know the light without the dark. And it's not possible to arrive at the light except through the dark, because it is that process that prepares us and hones us and perfects us. And it is a trial by fire. And that fiery passion, the longing that we feel deep down within ourselves to undertake those tests, those trials, and those ordeals is precisely what is calling us home, what is calling us to be one with the light by walking over the hot coals, by walking through hell and back again, to descend into hell and rise on the third day, transformed for the journey that we've undertaken through the darkness, through the fire, with naught but the fire and the light within our very soul to guide us. The fire and the light of our innermost being, who is our innermost intimate Christ, our innermost essence. Because it is that essence that is longing to be reborn, to be born of the waters in the Spirit. Unless ye be born of the waters in the Spirit, The waters being the sexual waters, and the spirit, the Holy Spirit, which is the fire. Let's Kundalini King says the tree of knowledge, and he says the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of knowledge of good and evil. He's referring to, well, he's referring to sex, really, and that's the what was allegorized in the book of Genesis. And Jennifer says, during Carl Jung's near-death experience, he saw a temple of light. That's not at all unlikely, Jennifer. And Kundalini says, the bigger the shadow one casts. And he says, the mature of heaven and hell, William Blake. There is one more thing to say about the way of light. And this, if I can put it this way, light is not just the brightness and the fire and the, when we contemplate that, light radiates. It's a matter of resplendence and radiation. Light gives. Light doesn't take. The fire in the light may consume, but not for its own sake. It consumes for the sake of giving light, of transforming, of transmuting. So the fire that burns the fuel doesn't do so for its own sake. It does so for the sake of creating the heat and the light, which it then promptly sheds, gives away, lets go. In other words, the light is selfless. The light gives. The light shines. I don't know of any example in which the light exhibits anything that would resemble selfishness or greed. The light does not consume. It, sure, where it shines, the darkness recedes, but the light doesn't consume the darkness. It's worthwhile contemplating this, that the way of light is part and parcel with the path of selflessness. And this, of course, is what Buddhists refer to as no self. And why it is impossible to contemplate being one with the light, one with the Christ, while having ego and having your ego intact. You can see why the path of Christification and to become a Christified master requires the elimination of all of one's karma and the elimination of all of one's ego, because the ego is the I. The ego is selfishness. It is antithetical to the Christ. It is antithetical to the light. But that light, that Christ, that Christic force is pure selflessness. It radiates, it shines, it gives, it creates, not for itself in the strictest sense, for others. And that's reflected in the life of Christ and in the life of so many others who walk the path of the Bodhisattva. Many saints, many martyrs, masters, prophets, avatars, Krishna and Buddha and Quetzalcoatl, and so many throughout history and throughout across many different traditions. It's important to point this out because many pursue the light in a very selfish way. They want the light for themselves. They want enlightenment. They want to know, but they want to know out of curiosity. They want to know because they want to awaken powers. They want the power of the light. They want the knowledge of the light. They want to be able to look in the mirror and say, I am an enlightened this and I am an ascended that. And if you call them out on this and you mention ego death, psychological death, they snap back, often with quite a bit of vehemence, and saying, no, 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 death of the ego, that's wrong. That's also ego. And they have very, very clever responses and ways to avoid facts. But all one has to do is meditate on light and say, where is the ego in light? Show me the ego that is in the light. Show me the ego that was present in Christ's sacrifice and resurrection. Show me the ego that's present in his life's work. The fire and water and the cleansing power of boiling water and the power of boiling water to crystallize, synthesize, is what plays into the alchemical process, the transmutation of lead into gold, the sublimation of the ego into the solar bodies, and including the solar Buddhic body or the body of solar consciousness. The fuel, the substance for that divine vehicle is bottled up inside of the egos. They're currently hoarding that for themselves. But the nature of light is to give it away. So if you comprehend light, the way of light, you will know that there is nothing selfish there. There is no hoarding or holding back. What did the Christ hold back? What did he fail to sacrifice for this humanity? What more could he have sacrificed for this humanity? Leah de Tanacour says, we be humble and share the light. And she also says, a song from Sunday school comes to mind. Hide it under a bushel? No, I'm going to let it shine. Ah, yes. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Exactly. Whatever little light that we have inside of us, it's not ours to hide in a bushel or hide under a bushel. It's not ours to hoard. It's not ours to cling to, like those, like if you've ever seen the movie Quest for Fire, and those Neanderthal men who are sent on a quest to find fire for the village, because the villagers, their village doesn't know how to make fire, so they have to keep fire in this lantern, in this crucible, and they have to keep the fire lit at all times, lest they lose their fire. And one day is their fire goes out, and they have no choice but to go on a quest for fire. But it's funny because these Neanderthals are holding on to their fire and clinging to their fire and desperate for that. That's the animal ego's way of dealing with fire. We have to hoard it. We have to protect it. We have to save it. We have to spare it because we don't know when we're going to need it. But that's not the way of light. The way of light is, like Leah mentioned in this song from Sunday school. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. You got to shine. The light that's inside of you is there because it wants its way. It wants to be what it is, and light shines. And the way of light is to follow the guidance and the longing of the source of that light. It's deep within ourselves. That's our innermost intimate Christ. That's our higher self. That's our innermost. Now, wisdom comes into play, experience comes into play, right? And not to cast pearls before swine, right? You don't necessarily want to shine your light all the time in every circumstance and for all people at all times, because number one, it might get you in trouble. And number two, they might take advantage of you. They might not appreciate it. So in other words, you're casting pearls before swine. You're wasting your light. You're wasting your fire. So there's prudence, there's temperance involved, there's wisdom involved, but not fear. Not fear, awareness. Because remember, the light inside of you that longs to shine is not without its own intelligence. And its intelligence is infinitely greater than our own. So it's not our place to question or second guess when and how the light within us longs to shine. When and where and for whom and under what circumstances, because there's a time and place for everything. And there are times when we need to withhold that light, or just allow it to exist sparingly. We just turn down the dimmer switch. And if we follow our intuition, we will know when that is. But if we think it through and we think that we know better and that we get to decide when and how that light shines, we're going to end up in all kinds of problems, because that's our ego co-opting and misappropriating and misapplying and misusing and abusing and exploiting that light and that fire. And that happens a lot. You may even notice it happening in your own life. You may have been doing that in the past. You may still be doing that. Because the light, after all, is what gives life to everything. It is the source of all life. I mean, just even science knows this. All energy are different wavelengths on the so-called electromagnetic spectrum of light. It's all light at different wavelengths. Which means it's all energy. And there's nothing that the forces of darkness, the forces of mechanicity, desire more than energy. So they will try to siphon off that light and that fire and use it for themselves and exploit it for themselves. And you see it all the time. And in terms of people, you see it when individuals rise to positions of power and prominence. And they have tremendous command over language. And they have tremendous influence over people and nations. They have the power of the word. And they use that power to amass and construct a force that they then unleash on the world. And you all know who I'm speaking of. That individual in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. That's an abuse, a misappropriation, an exploitation of the light. That way of light, which they are able to harness and channel through and give power to what they want to use it for. Like, that's not an accident, right? The IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, putting 1111 on Constitution Avenue. Because they are leveraging, they're exploiting the power of 1111. And the Constitution, which gave so much strength to a nation, and 1111 and the Constitution, the foundation of the nation. They're underpinning their activities of taxation, which is another fancy word for theft. But they're leveraging the power of 1111 here. They're exploiting the power of that light. We want to be careful that we do not allow our egos to take over and misappropriate and use and abuse and exploit our light and our fire. It's another reason why alchemy and transmutation is so important. Because the one thing that our egos will do, and if we observe ourselves, we will see this, is they waste that fire. That light gets used up. So even though, and it precisely is exploitable because of the nature of the light to give of itself, to give and give and give. That the egos will take advantage of that and exploit that. It's like someone on the street who's pretending to be destitute and begging on the street, and will take advantage of your kindness and your compassion and exploit that and take what you give them. Meanwhile, they might be, they might be wealthy. But how many con men, how many scammers do you know? And how many scams exist that take advantage of people's naivete and people's generosity? If you think about it, that's really what most politicians do. They take advantage of your trust. They win you over, and they exploit your trust and your faith in them. And then they go and they do whatever they want, whatever corrupt business they do once they're elected. Just remember that all those externalized examples are reflections of the internal con men, the internal forces of darkness within us that seek to exploit our light and our fire for their own ends. And those are our egos. And the way of light is confronting, facing, conquering, and eliminating all of those mechanical dark entities within ourselves, the obscurations to the light, those forces that are siphoning off our light and our fire. That's what we need to eliminate in order to truly be one with the way of light. Kundalini King says, my human 3.0 video is uploaded and ready, Atlas. Well, did you want me to play it? Is that the implication, Kundalini King? You got to give me a link. In the meantime, if there are any questions or comments, I'd happily hear them now. I've had one hell of a week and one heck of a weekend, and it ain't stopping. As soon as I'm done this, I got to go back to family and Easter and everything else. So we're gonna cut this relatively short today, anyway. But if there's something else you want to ask or you want to share, feel free to do so now. We'll be back next week, and hopefully I'll have sometime this week. I'll have this video with the what I walked through here with the PowerPoint presentation put into some kind of video format, and then have that uploaded, and I'll put that on YouTube and Facebook, and it'll have the challenge for next week. If I don't get it done this week, it'll have to be next week, and then it'll be a 2-week challenge this time, just because of the way everything turned out with Easter and these guests and everything. I mean, one day this week, I took them to Toronto, and we did the Royal Ontario Museum, and I took them around to Kensington Market and the Eaton Centre, Yonge and Dundas Square, and then down to St. Lawrence Market. So that, in grand total, it ended up being like 30,000 steps that one day. So that's just indicative of what it's been like playing tour guide. And we did 2 days in a row in Toronto, and so it's been an action-packed week, and it's not slowing down. So I don't know how productive I'm going to be over the next few days. They're heading back on Thursday, so hopefully 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 I'll find the time. I mean, there's not much left to do. I mean, to be honest with you, so it should be okay. Kundalini King says, I keep posting the link on the comments. You should play it. Well, which comments? Because I don't see the link showing up in the comments. He says you should play it. I'd love to play it, but I don't. You mean you're posting them in the comments to my video? Is that what you're doing? You're not posting them in the comments to this live stream. He says, I emailed you the link. Okay, well, I'm not checking emails during my live stream, Kundalini King. So let's see here. Let's see. Okay, bookmark, Wolfgang. Way of Lights, Glorian. I don't have an email from you, Kundalini King. He says, or make me a moderator and I can share the link in the comments. I have to make you a moderator to do that? I don't even know how to do that. I don't know. I don't even know how to make you a moderator. Hang on a second. Invite. Yeah, I don't know how to. I don't know how I can make you a moderator. Present or invite. Just invite a guest. Here, try this. Kundalini King, try clicking on this link or copy and paste this link. But when you say make you a moderator, what you're meaning is add you to the presentation. But I've received no email from you, so. Well, while we're waiting for Kundalini King to click the link and present himself so he can play his video, does anybody have any more comments or questions, or there's something else we could try to do? He says, yeah, I don't know what you mean by click on your name. You're not. I sent you an invite, right? If you follow that link, you should be able to join. There you are. Okay, there you are. Hello. So now you should be able to. You should be able to put something in the private chat.
All right, let me try that. Thanks for your patience, Atlas. I did the homework.
There it is. There it is. There it is. Okay. All right. Whoops. Wait a minute. Okay, hang on a second. No. Okay, so this is Kundalini King's answer to the challenge. So let's hear him out here. Oh, well, okay. Now we'll make it like that. Okay. No, hang on a second. Pause. You guys can't hear that, can you? You guys can't hear that. I'm going to have to remove this and stop screen. Now I got to share, present. Okay, present. Share screen, entire screen, this screen, and also share audio. Okay. Let's try this again.
Hello, my friend Atlas. This is Kundalini King. You can call me Snake. And this is me doing your challenge this week. And it's funny because the synchronicity here is last week I am reading out of the book Ego and Archetype by Edward Ettinger. Started chapter 7, which this book is quite the tome. It's an occult.
You guys can hear that now? Just somebody say yes if you can hear it, or no if you can't. You should be able to hear it now.
Book. I started chapter 7 last Sunday, and this week I did read through it, and I'm blown away. And of course, there's my own experience with the tattoo. It's Thigh Wheel, Tau Cross, and 1111, which I got in 2011. My one tattoo. But the symbol, I've been working on this one for a long time. I personally, that 1111 really has been a symbol, a sign. No more than a sign, it's a symbol. It speaks to a part of me. And when I pay attention to those nuances, I have developed a skill set, a human skill set, intuition and whatnot. But I did, if it's okay, would like to read chapter 7, which is the Trinity, archetype, and the dialect of development, just the first few pages, to tell you and show you what I've been doing this week. I'm learning. There are 3 sorts of wholes. The first, interior to the parts. The second, composed of the parts. And the third, knitting into one stuff the parts and the whole. Proclus, Proclus. I'm learning these. Anyway, the 3 and the 4. One of Jung's major discoveries is the psychological significance of the number 4, as it relates to the symbolism of psychic wholeness and the 4 functions. The significance of the quaternity is basic to his whole theory of the psyche, both as regards its structure and its developmental goal, the individuation process. Human 3.0. We are thus particularly alert to quaternity symbolism, as it appears in dreams and in the imagery of myth and folklore. However, there are other numerical motifs which are commonly encountered. Perhaps the most frequent of these is the theme of 3. Because of the predominant value that Jung attached to the quaternity, he tended in most cases to interpret Trinitarian images as incomplete or amputated quaternities. The approach calls forth certain objections. Victor White, for instance, writes, Are we always compelled to ask, when confronted with the number 3, where is the 4th? Are we to suppose that always and everywhere the number 3 is to be understood only as 4 minus 1? That every triangle is only a failed square? Or could it possibly be that ternary symbols are, so to speak, archetypal images in their own right, which which present a content distinct from that of the quaternity. And just a few more paragraphs. The present chapter will examine this question. Jung's most comprehensive discussion of Trinitarian symbolism is, in his essay, A Psychological Approach to the Dogma of the Trinity. Fascinating. The essay begins with a review of pre-Christian Trinitarian images and then proceeds with a description of the numerological symbolism of Plato and the Pythagoreans. Print is small on my eyesight's. Following some psychological commentary on the Christian Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Jung then summarizes the historical development of the dogma of the Trinity as a part of the Creed. This is followed by the detailed discussion of the psychology of the three aspects of the Trinity and a comparison with the image of quaternity. The latter is considered as bringing the Trinity to completion by the addition of the fourth previously rejected element, namely matter, devil, and the dark side. Without specifically stating it, Jung seems to be interweaving two different interpretations, which are at variance with one another. On the one hand, he interprets the Trinity as an incomplete representation of deity, perhaps necessary for a certain period of psychic development, individuation. Start with the 3 and 4. But inadequate for the needs of individuation because it leaves out of account the fourth principle of matter and the evil side of God. This interpretation is illustrated by the following quotation. After discussing the reality of evil power, Jung writes, and then I'll be finished. In a monotheistic religion, everything that goes against God can only be traced back to God himself. This thought is objectionable, to say the least of it, and has therefore to be circumvented. That is a deeper reason why highly influential personages, like the devil, a highly influential personage like the devil cannot stray back to certain Gnostic views, according to which the devil, as Satan now, and God, that's fascinating. I forgot about that. Satan, A-E-L, is God's first son, Christ being the second. A further logical inference would be the abolition. A further logical inference would be the abolition. Why am I having so much trouble? I'm nervous. Of the Trinity formula and its replacement by the quaternity. Now, I'm not sure how many people are really grasping this that might be listening, but I know you are, Attlas. Now, with Jung and Edward Enninger and this process of individuation, we are talking about the monad quite a bit in this book. It's a wonderful book, the monad. But with the ego self-access, he goes on, and I learned that 3 is ego and 4 is self. And the alchemical symbol of the triangle, the circle, and the square, the philosopher's stone. But what is 1111? 1111 is 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's a process. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what I learned this week. I've also been working on an art project, of course, of my music, and it's just something that I'm working on symbolically. And part of this book is on building this structure, this structure, this inner structure, as I work towards the center of myself, as I ascent to the center, that Axis Mundi, and it's beautiful. I will be publishing. I'm doing the 4 elements plus the 5th element, and I just finished. I'm recording that. It's called Fire, of course, all the 4 elements. But with Spirit, I think that's going to come after today's live stream, brother. I want to say thank you for the challenge. That's just where I'm at. I learned a lot from you. You're a great teacher, my friend. Anything I could do to help with your work is probably just by doing the work myself and participating. So with that, it's like I said, what is 1111? It's 4. It's a lot of things, but for me right now, it's the quaternity. It is. Snake signing out.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing, Snake, Kundalini King. Everyone still watching, do yourself a favor. Take your hand, make the number 4 with your left hand, right? And then make the number 3 with your right hand. Now, take your 3 fingers and put them so that they're contained in the 4. Because Kundalini King was talking about structure. And what does a structure do if not contain and uphold? Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome, Kundalini King, aka Snake. No, that's exactly what this place is. But look for a moment. If you're still you've cradled the 3, okay, in the 4, right? What's a structure but that which contains, that which houses, like a temple? And how you need 4 pillars to hold the masculine, feminine, and union, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It takes 4 pillars to do that. Well, it also takes 4 pillars, 1, 2, 3, 4, to uphold the edifice of the temple, which is 1, 2, 3. Have you never considered or questioned, asked yourself why it is that where's the temple I'm looking for when I need one? Oh, there it is. Okay, so the why temples have 1, 2, 3, 4 pillars, and why the edifice of the temple is a triangle. 1, 2, 3. Masculine. You know what? Well, masculine, feminine, and union of masculine, feminine. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Ra, Isis, Horus, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and on it goes, right? Trinity after Trinity after Trinity, and the temples have 4 pillars. And like I was showing earlier, the entrances, well, the 4 pillars have 3 gates. So the 1111 is 4, but it's also 3, because you can't have 4 pillars without the 3 spaces in between. And it's the space, like you said yourself. It's like you said, it's a creating a sacred space to do the work. That's what the 4 pillars do. They create the sacred space to do the work. Is that not what the 4 elements are? The 5th element is the sacred space that the 4 elements are in. So the 5th element is the foundation for the 4 pillars. But what is that? It's the space in between, the sacred marriage. I see it, right? There it is. You said yourself, thank you. Thanks for creating a sacred space to do the work. What is that? What is a temple if not a sacred space? Why do we build these things? Right? If not to create a sacred space. And as you can see in this particular temple, right? The images on the pillars, okay, they're all erotic because this was a temple of white tantra. The four elements, fire, water, earth, and air, to create these three portals: masculine, feminine, and union of masculine, feminine, for the energies to flow up and atom, right? Up and fusion energy, right? So you fuse two atoms together and you create the light and power and fire of the sun, right? That's the way of light. And if you think of those four pillars are feminine, and the three light are masculine because they're what penetrate the space that's created by the feminine, right? The spirit and matter and spirit. And we see this over and over again. Temple after temple after temple. So 1111, but yeah, you're right about the four and creating the space. The space of love. The sacred space to do the work. And that work is alchemy, which is white tantra. And you have to work with the four elements to do that, right? There's earth, fire, water, and what's the one for air? Well, we can just do that for air. Well, I guess maybe that's too small. Here, maybe make that bigger. Anyway, but thanks for sharing your video with us. And yeah, no, the more you dig into it, the more amazing it'll be. And it's the more you see it and the more you see all of its different manifestations, the more you'll be like, oh, okay. And the ancients knew this, and they knew it not like in some fleeting intuitive way. They knew it like in a concrete way, such that they baked it into everything that they were doing, right? And that then why so many of the temples in the ancient world, certainly in the West, were look like they do. With the with this configuration, right? Oops. With the triangle or the pyramid atop four pillars, which, by the way, is the Great Pyramid of Giza, because each side of the Great Pyramid has four sides, but each side of the Great Pyramid has 3 points, which, if we go back to the in the presentation to this point, right? We have, right, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 movements, but there's 1, 2, 3 points, 4 lines and 3 points, or 3 stops. So when you draw a pyramid, and the cubic stone, which is the nine-sided cubic stone, right? There's a cube and a pyramid on top of a cube. That's also the obelisk. So at the base of the pyramid, there are 4 corners and there's 4 sides, but on each side there's only 3 corners. So a pyramid is 11-11. It's 4 to 3. And by the way, that's also 5. The 5 and 6 are encoded in here, just as they're encoded in our 11-11 model. Because if we step back to this point, okay, what I said, you have to repeat the law of 2 3 times in total. So you repeat the law of 2 plays out once in the big circle, but then it plays out 2 more times to involve and create the 2 inner circles. Well, that means that this is 1 point, 2 points, and 3 points, but each of these interior circles must have an origin which I should, I could probably have used a different color for that. So let's do the white again. Okay, so now when we count, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points, which are precisely how many points you get in the pyramid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But because we know that this point number 3 is a shared point, then there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this middle point is not just 3, it's 3 and 4. And that this is not 4, this is 5, and this is not 5, this is 6. And if you draw a dot down the center of a pyramid to its base, then you have a point in the middle of the square. Or you have connecting dots, connecting lines from all the corners of the pyramid into the center, the heart of the pyramid, to get the 6th point. So the 6 is encoded in that pyramid as well. And 5 plus 6 is 11. So just something to consider as we look at this in the grand scheme of things. And Kundalini says 11-11 is Christ then. Well, basically, yes. Essentially. And 11-11 is the minimum numerical expression for creation. Well, what creates is the Christ. That is what comes into that is what comes into being. what manifests. That is the Christ. So it's the number of the Christ. And that's what I was explaining earlier with the cross, and how the cross is basically 1111. Because it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And you put the cross in, which is the law of 3, right? But if you put that in motion, well, depending on which direction you go, but if you put it, let's say you put it in motion this way, so that, and that, now you have Inri. Igne, I'm going to do that in a different color. Igne, Natura, Renovator, Tour, Integra. Oh, you can't see that. Don't have it on screen. Okay. So let me move that over here. Yeah. Okay, get that out of the way. Okay. So Inri. Igne, Natura, Renovator, Integra. That's INRI. Inri. Right? So that's the cross, but the cross set in motion. And that means the fire renews nature incessantly. Incessantly. And what is the fire, if not the fire of fires and the light of lights of the cosmic Christ? And if the cross is 3, right? Positive, negative, and union, then the three factors, birth, death, and sacrifice, that set it in motion is the 4. And Inri just happens to be 4 letters, but anyway, that's that the cross is the 3, but the arms of the cross, of the swastika, but also the arms of the cross are 1, 2, 3, 4. So 3 and 4 are indivisible. You can't separate the two, right? Because when you put up 4, right, you create the space. 3 spaces, 4 pillars. You can't separate the two. 3 and 4 are inseparable. And that's why 7 is the organizational law of the universe. Anyone have any more questions or comments? I think we've covered the topic sufficiently. I mean, tell me if you think I've missed something, but again, how do we get from 1111 now to the Tao? There's your challenge for next week. And hopefully I'll get this video done and have this online, and I can share it with everybody, and everybody can try to take part in this next challenge. If there's no more questions or comments, I want to thank you for joining me today on an Easter Sunday, no less. I hope you have an excellent Easter. I do hope you have a chance to be with friends, family, loved ones, and celebrate this special time. Celebrate the light. Jennifer, you're very welcome. Thank you for taking the time and being with us today. Leah says, "Thank you, Atlas. Blessings all." Thank you, Leah, and blessings to you as well. If there's nothing else, then from anyone, thanks again to Kundalini King for sharing this video, and hopefully we'll see you all next week. Have a great week and enjoy the rest of your Easter. And as always, I wish you all an inferential peace. Take care, everyone.